Hi and welcome to this video about Web Screen Configurator, where we're giving some demonstrations of different configurations that have been requested by or built in customer situations. So these are all autofill related, and we're kind of expanding on the previous video to show a variety of different kind of easy to fairly complex autofill scenarios. So the first one is a couple of changes in registration of incoming invoices. So in this screen, the customer wanted a few things done. Firstly, they wanted an invoice description to be defaulted, and they wanted the use description on an entire invoice to be ticked, both of which can actually be done with Windows options, but I'm going to show you how you can add to that functionality by, for example, applying a different description depending on some circumstance, depending on another value in the system. Also worth adding that use description on an entire invoice, that is ticked by default here, but you won't be able to tick that by default on an AP rejection task, for example, where an invoice comes back to accounts payable. You wouldn't be able to default that without Web Screen Configurator. What they also wanted in purchase order details, firstly, this section, they wanted that to be expanded by default. So normally when you come to this screen, this will be like this, and you'll always have to expand it to see those purchase order details. So they wanted that expanded. And in terms of the autofill, they wanted to be able to see on each line the additional text from the purchase order. So this field has been added. So let's have a quick look at how that all works. I'm going to actually load an invoice here just so you can see the purchase order information. So I'm going to load order number 1, 2, a few zeros, then 1. So again, we've got invoice description and tick box hard coded. If I go into PO details, we have some text here. So this is some product information. This is some more information, yay, it says. So if I go to the purchase order, we can see that if I scroll down, there's the first line, some product information, and then the second line, this is some more information, yay. Now this might be a little bit more complicated than it looks, and that's because of these carriage return lines and the way the system treats those and how they get entered into the table. But let's have a look at how this works. So if I go to Web Screen Configurator, let's take this kind of one by one. Go into visibility. Now there's a fair few things going on here, but I'll show you the ones that are most appropriate. So the first thing here is match purchase. What's the full name? Match purchase order. So that is that section that we see down here. That's the name of that section, again from the debug. And all I've done here for that whole section is ticked maximized. So by default that is expanded, not collapsed. So you can do the opposite. If you wanted something to be minimized by default, you could tick minimized. So that is firstly active. Secondly, to get that add text field, I've needed to add a new field, a new column, which is here, match purchase order, and then add text is the field name I've given to that column. Now, unlike the previous autofill for example, variants that I showed in a previous video, where you're essentially that value is already there and it's just waiting for a column to be populated, in which case you have to make sure the field name is the same name as that table column. The text for this from the purchase order comes from a completely different table than the rest of the information that gets populated in here. All of this information comes from PO detail. This here is from PO detail text, or PODT text. So it's a completely different table. So I'm not going to be able to just add a column and have that text automatically complete. So there is some SQL needed for that. So for this one here, then add text. If ever you've added a new value, then you also of course need to give it a title, in which case this is additional text. So in here, in the titles, there's my additional text option. This one here, just out of interest, just to show you, you can also add tooltips, so titles and or tooltips to things. So if I hover over this field on the invoice screen, oh, this one here, there you go, I've got my tooltip saying please enter your description here. Okay, so it's just a little aside. So the matching purchase order, add text, you can see it says additional text, and then finally the actual autofill. So if I come into here, you can see then again the source section. So the thing that's going to trigger this to happen is any entry in that purchase order section. And essentially what that means is when I initially load this purchase order number on the front screen, that's going to populate this data, and so there is activity happening in that section. That activity is what's going to trigger this autofill to happen. All right, so the target field is that add text field that I created. I've got overwrite ticks, so if there's anything else there, let's say I put a different PO number in so it gets replaced, it will overwrite whatever's in there. The target is read-only, of course, it can't be changed in that field, so it's a read-only field. And just like the overwrite, I've got accept changes, so if there was anything there on load, it would overwrite it on load. There isn't anything there on load because I've created that value, but it's always good to check that box. And finally, we've got our actual SQL statement. You can see here I've got another couple of autofills. So as I mentioned in the previous video, the description, that is just a hard-coded text value, so that is just entered with individual speech marks, or apostrophes I should possibly say. And then the copy description, because that is a checkbox, it's either going to be a 1 or a 0. It's a Boolean, so it's true or false, 1, 0. So a 1 there indicates that that is checked. All right, there is another screen I wanted to show you, so I'm going to close these, and I want to show you a couple of things on the sales orders screen that I've created. So on here, again, a customer wanted to have, on the sales order screen, a customer group to be shown when the specific customer is chosen. And so in this case, let me choose a customer in here. So let me choose one of the DC group customers. If I tab away, ignore the credit limit, but I've got domestic customers in that box. What I also have on the right hand side is an external order ID that gets populated based on the customer group, or specifically actually the customer starting characters. DC means it's just domestic customers, and DC is what's driving this. If I was to change this for IC, so intercompany, that external order ID changes. And if I change it again to a sundry supplier, oops, let me change that, to ZZ, sundry supplier. Okay, I think those are the only options. And so, like I said before, for the description on the incoming invoice register, you can not only populate values, but you can also make it so that it has a particular value based on some other field in your screen. So let's have a quick breakdown of how that works. So if I go back to the web screen configurator, I'm in my sales orders attribute master file. So in visibility, now there's a lot going on here, but again, this is the one we want to look at. We're going to look at filters in a separate video, but I've got a new field called customer group or cust group, which is in the header section. That's this section here. All right, it's read only, and that's all the information I have on there. That's all I need to create that new option. All right, in the titles, of course, if you create a new field, you have to give it a title. And so this one here is called customer group, and it has a tooltip title on it as well. So if I hover over, this is a customer group of the chosen customer. So I've got a tooltip title, but the main thing is the main title. And if we go to autofill, so the header customer group, I've got this SQL statement. Okay, and just to show you what that is, if I open up Notepad++, so that was the one for previous, it's this information here. All right, so it's basically choosing the description of that customer group based on the customer header. What we've also got is, if I go back to the autofill, when we've got this references, which is changing each time different type of customer is chosen. And again, this is just some SQL statement. Okay, so that text in here is what's populating those that external reference value. All right, so lots of things you can do with SQL to select information from other areas of the system or from other values within the same screen itself, and to bring them into the field. Thank you for watching.